Welcome to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables, and whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a café au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 165th episode of the Simple Sophisticate. Today we're going to talk about food and enjoying it every single day. And here's the good part, loving how it makes you feel and look. So the results. So loving the results and also being able to enjoy food and the whole experience every single day. This week's petit plaisir, before I dive into the main topic of what we're going to talk about on today's episode, is a book that was recommended to me. The author was actually recommended to me by a listener, by a reader also of the blog. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this author's writing style. And I think you will too. It's a leisurely, lovely, but also full of ideas and inspiration for eating well and living well. So stay tuned at the end of today's episode and I'll share with you what that book is. But let's talk about 10 ways to enjoy eating every day and loving the results. I want to begin with a quote from Nigel Slater in his book, The Kitchen Diaries, which is actually 12 months of the year, his approach to eating. And he really just journals through the whole year as to how he ate with the seasons. It's absolutely lovely. So here's a quote: "Right food, right place, right time. It is my belief that this is the best recipe of all. A crab sandwich by the sea on a June afternoon. A slice of roast goose with applesauce and roast potatoes on Christmas Day. Hot sausages and a chunk of roast pumpkin on a frost-sparkling night in November. These are meals whose success relies not on the expertise of the cook, but on the more basic premise that this is the food of the moment, something eaten at a time when it is most appropriate, when the ingredients are at their peak of perfections, when the food, the cook, and the time of year are at one with each other." And this quote is really the guiding premise for today's episode, and this idea of learning and knowing how to cook seasonally. And if we do so, it really isn't that complicated because the flavors are right there. They just want to be enjoyed. And that's the good thing. We don't have to force the flavor by putting all these heavy sauces on it or and there's just so many things that we don't have to do when we have quality seasonal food. So being able to have what we want is not always a blessing, but having what we need is imperative to our well-being. And what we need is nutrient-rich food. And when it tastes its most delicious, it is all the more attractive to enjoy. So what I mean by this idea of being able to have what we want all the time is not a blessing is that supermarkets have made the food we love available for us, the consumers, year-round. Well, we all know a tomato in December, if we live in the Northern Hemisphere, here in the States, tastes nothing like its summer counterpart. Instead, pick up an apple, or if you're in Hawaii or on the West Coast, a rambutan, seasonally available between September through March. And those are those fruits, and I actually came across them when I was in South Korea in March. The fruits that are prickly on the outside, they're about the size of a kiwi, but they have this really thick skin, and then they have pokey, and they don't hurt pokey, but they have these visually pokey things coming out all around them, like these long, not long, but hairy little doohickey thing. And you're thinking, I'm going to eat that? But yeah, you do. And it's this very subtle, juicy fruit in the middle. But that's in season, September through March. So if you're able to get to that, that's a great one to have in the winter instead of tomatoes. So satisfy your sweet tooth and eat what is readily available and full of flavor. I can only speak for myself, but part of the reason I fall into the habit of eating the same vegetable, fruit, or meal year round as a go-to is that it's easy. I think it saves me time and I don't have to think about it. And while it does ease the need to have to figure out what to eat each night or for lunch, it isn't actually the best for my health. Now, initially, it will take time and our full attention to learn what is in season, where we live, and know what to do with it when we get it back to our kitchen. But once we gain that knowledge, it becomes a habit. In essence, we are becoming our own home chef, capable of cooking anything with fresh ingredients and whatever's left in the refrigerator. This feat may sound impossible. I know it sounded impossible to me, and I think that I'm still in the middle of this, probably in the middle of this learning process. But over the last couple years, as I've had the ability to have more access to different types of produce and more seasonal produce, I found that I'm more comfortable in the kitchen pulling out what I have in the fridge and also picking up that one fresh ingredient from that particular season and bringing it home and go, okay, what do we do with this? And even if you're not someone who likes to cook, most of us still eat home the majority of the time. So it doesn't have to be a passion. You don't have to love, being in the kitchen. And you don't have to be a foodie to learn the basics of seasonal cooking. Your health, your waistline, your peace of mind will thank you if you just learn how to eat well seasonally. And again, it doesn't have to be fancy, and I'm going to show you 10 ways to do that in today's episode. So let's get started on those 10 ways. The first thing is to shop at small local shops, markets, and specialty businesses. And what I mean by that is, for example, your fish market, your cheese shop, your local bakery, the farm stand. Hey, maybe your neighbor has a bountiful garden and they sell, or maybe they even give away some of their produce. Take them up on it. Wait until whatever it is that they put it out. Maybe they only put it up a couple days a week. Wait, have patience. That food's going to taste so much better. You may not be able to have it on the day you want it, but when you do have it, it's going to be amazing. And when you choose to frequent these small food shops rather than that giant supermarket, the shopping experience will become far more pleasurable, and the food you purchase will be fresher and most likely more in season, because they're not shipping it from around the world to get to your supermarket. As well, you'll begin to establish, and this is what I'm really enjoying, relationships with the experts who run these businesses. And it's not just about, having a conversation, how's your day? You're also going to be able to ask them questions. Okay, what can I do with this? This is where the learning can happen. I didn't expect of myself, and I think that was something I had to tell myself, Shannon, you can't know all this. You have to ask people who do know. And that's the benefit of having those small little boutiques or those farmers markets. Ask the people behind the counter. A few weeks ago, I shared on the blog how to navigate and to make the most of going to your farmer's market. And I showed 8 to 10 different benefits and things to do when you go there. And one of them is talk to the people behind the counter. Say, hey, what is this? Number one, maybe you don't know. And ask them, what would you do with this? How should I prepare this? It's that simple. And you'll learn about what you will be eating, but also feeding those you love. And that's where the journey begins, curiosity. So number one is start shopping rather than at your local big food mart. Shop at any of the local food shops that you have available to you, those specialty markets, that bakery, things like that. Number two, shop once a week to stock up items in your epicery or your pantry, but then shop day to day for fresh food. Nigel Slater has a quote about this. The Kitchen Diaries, his book that original quote came from, and this one as well, is a gentle plea to buy something, however small, each day, to take time to shop, to treat it as a pleasure rather than a chore. He's talking about food here. The weekly capsule menu is something I believe works wonderfully for planning the meals for the week and the ingredients, which should be versatile for each recipe item. And that's something that we've talked about here on this podcast, and it's on the blog, and you can get those downloads on the blog. And while I typically do a weekly shopping run to my farmer's market or Trader Joe's, I do stop by the local produce stand or the bakery, etc., throughout the week to ensure I have the freshest ingredients. So it's really how I approach it. And I've included a link to what to include in your epicery. Those are the items to always have on hand, no matter what time of year. These are the items that finish those meals, that complete those meals. That's what I tend to on the weekly basis. All right, because it doesn't matter if they're fresh per se, or as fresh per se. If it's, say, for example, I need a lemon. I usually will stock up on lemons, get 2 or 3 every single week, because I know I'm going to use them for a multitude of different recipes throughout the week. But it's those daily, maybe every other day. And I know we're busy. So I know Nigel wants us to shop every day. Well, that's his life. His life is food. So it makes sense that he can do it. We're probably not going to be able to do it every day. But maybe you have a grand dinner that you're going to have on Friday night. Instead of getting those ingredients on Sunday when you do your weekly shopping, wait until Friday morning or Thursday evening to go shopping for those. Those items that when they're fresh, the flavor is that they're most amplified. Okay, that's number 2. Shop once a week for the stock up items, but then day to day for the fresh food. 3, curate a kitchen space that works well. No fancy gadgets necessary. As anyone who has traveled in Europe and England will attest, kitchens are very small, even in the most grand of cities. And while many people, especially in Paris and London and just name your favorite destination, will want to dine at the many restaurants, cooking in a small kitchen is very possible. So don't let the size of your kitchen be the roadblock. I always think of Rachel Khoo in her Little Paris Kitchen, the cooking show that she used to have on Cooking TV, and how she was able to make use of that small, minimal space. And I provide a link to that so you can check out some of those episodes, because she really is an inspiration as to what you can do, what you need in a kitchen to make it work well for you. Most importantly, regardless of space, maybe you do have a big kitchen, make sure you have the basic tools and essentials, as well as a well-stocked epicerie. And I will show you the list of what, number 1, the tools to have, which aren't many. It really isn't many. You do not need that many fancy gadgets. In fact, I had a really hard time purchasing the spiralizer that I use for my zucchini noodles because I don't like having gadgets in my kitchen, but I also realized, how else am I going to make zucchini noodles or sweet potato noodles? And so that was one thing that I thought, okay, it's less than $20. I'll do it. But I really don't have a lot of gadgets. I think the only 2 major gadgets that I use are my KitchenAid mixer and my food processor. And that's really it. The rest are just simple quality tools. So a really nice knife, for example, and then having the pantry or the epicerie stocked. And then I can really go at whatever season is upon us and make something. And it's usually something very simple, which I'll share some ideas here in a minute. So that's number 3, curate a kitchen space that works well. No fancy gadgets necessary. Number 4, plant a garden, no matter how much space you have. Whether you have a large plot of land or a windowsill, plant what you can, what you're curious about. And with each year, add something different. Try something new. As well, try to plant something to be enjoyed in each season. Rhubarb in the early spring, it's a perennial, so you'll have to plant it once, and it keeps coming up year after year. Strawberries in the late spring. Fresh herbs all summer and sometimes year-round, depending on where you keep them, if you keep them inside in pots. And squash and pumpkin in the fall. The possibilities are endless. Have fun and just play in the dirt. So number 4 is plant a garden no matter how much space you have. Number 5, educate yourself on seasonal offerings. Whether from books, cookbooks are a delight to read, and you can learn so much as you peruse each recipe, especially if it's organized seasonally. And at the end of today's episode and on the show notes, I have went and found 5 or 6 seasonal cookbooks that come highly recommended. So if you want to start really creating that repertoire of what to make and what to cook in the seasons, I have some cookbooks I think that will be helpful to you. You can also read textbooks, watch your favorite food television programs. I learned all sorts of things from Ina Garten and Giada De Laurentiis. Even when I watch Chopped, I learned something. But there's also all the archives of Julia Child's The French Chef. You learn so much from those shows, and you can get those on Amazon Prime for $1.29 an episode, I think, and you can also buy them in the pack. Or if you have a local farmer, you can learn, like we said, from them when they're at the farmer's market, or maybe they're a friend of yours. Ask away. Become curious about what is in season where you live. Choose to see it as an adventure of discovery. When I approach cooking this way, I don't kick myself if something doesn't work out. I celebrate the opportunity to try, and regardless of the food, because it's in season, it's usually delicious. Again, not because of my prowess, but because seasonal food is good all on its own. Now, I found 3 sources that I think will be very helpful for you to figure out, if you're curious, what food is in season where you live. There's one that's organized for all 50 states here in the United States. It's an online source. I've provided the link. You simply choose your state, then you choose the season, and they actually do early spring, late spring, mid spring. So it's not just spring or summer. They do, the graduation throughout the season, and then the list appears based on where you live and the season of different things that are in season for you to go look for. And they also provide recipes as well, which I think is great. There's also a few others for United Kingdom citizens, as well as those who live in North America, so Canada as well. And it's called Eat the Seasons, and I'll provide a link on the show notes for that. Same kind of concept. They'll share the season. They'll give you some ideas of the produce that you can look for. And then obviously Epicurious is a wonderful resource for recipes on all of the seasonal food. So I'll provide a link to all of those resources for what food is in season, depending on where you live, on the show notes, the simplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 165. Now I would like to take a moment and introduce you to our sponsor for today's podcast. A very intriguing new app has become available, and if you know me, if you follow me on the blog or you listen to this podcast, you know I'm a huge fan of journaling. I journal every evening. I keep a blog notebook with me to write down ideas, but sometimes, and you know this happens, I'm not the only one, an idea will pop up and I don't have a pen or paper, or I don't have my journal. And the one thing I usually always do have on me, though, is my phone. Well, this new app is something I'd like to share with you. It's called Trunk. Trunk solves the classic journaling problem of never actually having the time to keep a journal, but we all know we have the thoughts and ideas and dreams running through our minds nonstop. Trunk makes it easy to collect your big or small ideas and not lose them in the hustle and bustle of your schedule. Let me explain how it works. Trunk is a journaling app that is an automated phone call that gives you 2 minutes to share your thoughts throughout your day. The beauty of this app, this is what I really like about it, is that it saves and transcribes what you have verbally shared. You can then share whatever you've verbally spoken into your phone via email if you have an idea for work or you want to share something with a family member or a friend. And then you can save it for yourself, obviously, as well. Whatever it is you need it to do. You'll find it in the iTunes App Store, and you can try it for 30 days for free. And once you have it, rest assured that that idea that always seems to escape your memory can be captured and transformed into what it was meant to be. All right, so back to the list. We've talked about the first 5 ways that you can enjoy eating every day and love the results. Let's get to the remaining 5. Number 6 is discover the power of food. The list is long of which to read to learn about what is the best balanced diet and how and where to find the nutrients you seek. But understanding where you can find fiber, grains, for example, the less processed, the better, and understanding exactly what an avocado gives to your body encourages you to step toward these foods with curiosity and not fear that you are going to be eating too much fat or calories. With these 2 items that I just mentioned, they will satiate you long before the caloric count is anything to worry about. And fat isn't bad, remember. Here's a quote from Nigel Slater to ponder. Roast rhubarb on a January morning. Pick your own strawberries in June, a piece of chicken on the grill on an August evening. This is more than just something to eat. It is food to be celebrated, food that is somehow in tune with the rhythm of nature. Quite simply, the right food at the right time. So number 6 is discover the power of food. Number 7, have a plan. The primary reason I have created the seasonal capsule menus is to provide a starting point or foundation for how to cook seasonally in fall and spring. And just a note, summer and winter, which people have been requesting, will be coming in my second book, which is going to be released next year. So stay tuned. I'm working on them as we speak. With time and practice, you'll begin to incorporate your favorite ingredients and discover which recipes you like and even create your own. So number 7 is have a plan. Number 8 is keep it simple. Truly, the best meal you will make on a regular basis should be simple because, again, it is the food, the quality of food that makes it so. For example, my go-to recipe for vegetables year-round is to roast them. Name the vegetable, and for the most part, I will roast it. Asparagus in the spring, add some lemon and a bay leaf, a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper, pop it in the oven for about 10-15 minutes. Voila. Zucchini and squash in summer and fall. Olive oil again, salt and pepper, 400 degrees, 30 minutes, done. And broccoli is one of my favorites, and I eat that probably the most from fall through early spring. And I do the same exact thing that I would do to the zucchini and squash. Oh, and I just tried, I don't know if any of you guys saw Cook Like a Pro this last weekend on Barefoot Contessa. She showed how to enjoy and make cauliflower delicious. And hey, you add cheese to anything, it's going to be delicious, but this was so simple and she was absolutely right. I roasted cauliflower, and the last 2 or 3 minutes in the oven, you're roasting it for about 30 minutes at 350 degrees. For the last 2 minutes, sprinkle on Gruyere and Parmesan, and it is delicious. Highly recommend it. So keep it simple. Again, let the food speak. You don't have to worry about being a professional in that kitchen. Number 9, try learning and incorporating a new habit each week. Perhaps one week you will learn and become confident with roasting, as I was just talking about a moment ago. And then maybe the next week you'll make your own herb butter. Then the next, a beloved go-to vinaigrette. Whenever you eat out and you taste something you love, ask the chef how they made it, or the waiter or waitress to ask the chef. Recently, I had the most delicious huckleberry ricotta mousse, and out of curiosity, as huckleberries have a very limited season here, I wanted to remember the recipe for the next year. I asked. They happily shared the ingredients, and I went home, found a ricotta mousse recipe from a trusted source online, and adapted it to my taste and for the ingredients that I wanted to make with it, so the huckleberries. So number 9 is try learning and incorporate a new habit each week. And the last one is dine at farm-to-table restaurants. One of the best ways to learn about seasonal food is to try it, as it is prepared by well-trained chefs. More and more restaurants at all different price points are following this model of seasonal recipes, and in so doing are teaching and informing their patrons how to cook delicious food at home. And again, just ask. If you like something, ask the waiter, ask the chef. It's a compliment to them. They probably aren't going to tell you the exact recipe, although they might, because in all honesty, it's their expertise of pulling it all together that makes it so delicious. But they'll at least tell you the ingredients, and you can go home and play with it. So number 10 is dine at farm-to-table restaurants. Learning how to feed our bodies well takes time, just like putting together a signature style. But hopefully, with these tips, the journey through the seasons will be pleasurable, delicious, and an experience to savor rather than a task to complete. I want to leave you with a quote from Thomas Edison. "The doctor of the future will give no medication, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." We all have the opportunity. We can do this. Just be patient. Just be patient. So I promised that I was going to share a handful of cookbooks that were seasonally based, that were highly recommended. And I have a mix of new and old ones here. I have the one that I have in my kitchen that is wonderful, The French Women Don't Get Fat Cookbook by Mariel Giuliano. And I also have P. Allen Smith's seasonal recipes from the garden. There are also there's one for soups, seasonal soups from international chefs and authors. And then there's organic cookbook for the seasonal, sustainable, simple, and pure food. And then there's a new book that just came out by Joshua McFadden called The 6 Seasons. So instead of looking at our vegetables as having only 4 seasons, he goes into all the different shoulder seasons of the 4 seasons. Not all, there's only 6, I guess, not 8. But the idea that there are so many different ways to look at vegetables and to open and broadening our perspectives on that. So if you're curious, that's a book to pick up that was just released. So that's just a sampling of some of the books that I have on the show notes for you to check out if you're interested in broadening your knowledge of seasonal food and recipes. And I also include a bunch of posts from the archives on very specific topics: the capsule menu, just understanding food and what it does for your body, how and why to shop locally for produce, what to do with olive oil, so many things. So that's also on the show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 165. And I'll be right back with this week's Petit Plaisir. All right, welcome back. Well, I have actually kind of already shared with you what today's petit plaisir is. And I want to thank a reader from England, I believe they were from England, who recommended that I check out the writings of Nigel Slater. Nigel Slater is a well-known entity in England. He is a food writer, journalist, broadcaster. He has had various food shows as well, and his list of cookbooks is very, very long. So I didn't really know where to start, but as I was perusing his list of books, I picked The Kitchen Diaries. And the reason I did that is that I wanted a simple read at night that was organized around food, but also similar to a memoir. I wanted something, to be honest, kind of like Under the Tuscan Sun. I wanted something like that, where I got to know the person, but I also got to know the food and learn a little bit more about where he lives. And that's exactly what I got. Starting in January, it's a journal, but it's a beautiful journal full of tons of recipes, simple and detailed, and it's beautifully done. So that is my petit plaisir this week, The Kitchen Diaries. He has a profound appreciation and knowledge of the food that he is sharing with people. And you'll see on today's show notes a picture of him in his kitchen. And in the book, one of the things he shares about his kitchen, and he is my muse for this episode in many ways, when he curates a kitchen that works well, his garden is literally outside the doors of his kitchen. How more perfect is that? And you'll see a glimpse of that garden and his kitchen and how simple his kitchen is. So check out the book. There are many other book titles though, so click on his name and you can see all the different options, and maybe there's something else that interests you. So the show notes, you'll find the book, you'll find a picture of his kitchen, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 165. I hope you've enjoyed this week's Petit Plaisir, where each week ideas are shared to make the everyday all the more enjoyable. Tune in at the end of each Monday's podcast, where I'll recommend a book, a film, or a recipe, anything that is a simple pleasure to satiate your sophisticated taste. Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pick up the book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide. To stay caught up on the most recent podcasts, blog posts, and receive exclusive news as well as an extra dose of inspiration, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's weekly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox each Friday to enjoy with a hot cup of tea or your morning coffee, just in time to jumpstart the weekend. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonne journée!